welcome back to Bookish Brits. My name is Michelle, and I thought that it might be interesting today to talk to you about some of the books that I read and loved as a teenager. Now, as you know, I love young adult fiction. I love it. It is what I primarily read, but I'm in my 30s, and it's not really aimed at me. When I was growing up, there were books aimed at teenagers that I did enjoy reading. There was Christopher Pike and Lois Lowry and Carolyn B. Cooney and loads of really great authors that were writing books for children and teenagers that were fantastic. But to be honest, I didn't read that primarily. There wasn't a big enough section, I think, in the library. There wasn't a big enough focus on them for me to have read them exclusively. So today I'm going to be telling you about 6 of the books that I did read and enjoy as a teenager. Now, the first book should come as no surprise, and that is The Outsiders by SE Hinton. I remember that this was a required reading book in 8th grade. I read it. I loved it. I read it again and again and again and again. This book is probably my most reread book that I own. I love it so much. It still manages to move me quite a lot. I always cry no matter how many times I've read this book. Now, the second book I wanted to talk to you about today is this book. It's Shogun by James Clavell. As a teenager, I kind of struggled in terms of what do I need, what should I be reading next, what do you recommend? And I was asking everyone, my school librarian, my dad, friends, family members, anyone. I was desperate to read more interesting books, but I just didn't know where to look. And Shogun, it was a book that I found on my dad's bookshelf, and I decided to pick it up and read it, and I really fell in love. This is the book that made me fall in love with Japan, and that love has stayed with me for decades now. I'd love to go. And this book tells the story about a Western man who travels to Japan, and it's kind of his experiences within the Japanese culture. It's quite a chunky book, and I find it amusing that my reading habits have changed so much from when I was younger to now. When I was a teenager, I loved these big chunky books. I loved being swept away and into a new world and a new setting, and staying with that new world for a very long time. Whereas now, 300-page books make me feel a little bit antsy. I'd really like to reread this book at some point just to see how my opinions about this book and this story have changed since I first read it as a teenager. Next up on books that I loved as a teenager is Gone with the Wind by Margaret Mitchell. This came about just because I watched the film as a teenager. It was on TV one day. I loved it. And you know, sometimes it says based on the novel by on films, and I find that really helped me as a teen. I have another book coming up soon which I read after loving the film. So for me, the film did come first with Gone with the Wind, but I love this book so much more than the film because this book, again, it's really chunky, and it had so much more detail and description of everything that's going on, that while I do love the film, it didn't really capture that for me. And I loved it. I loved it. I won't tell you what it's about because everyone kind of knows what it's about, right? But fantastic. Loved every second of it. The fourth book I wanted to talk to you about is this one. I've managed to lose the dust cover, but it's Exodus by Leon Uris. And I remember I picked up this book because of a high school assignment in which we had to read a book from a particular list, and I can't remember what all of the titles on this list had in common. I really don't. And I actually don't think that I chose Exodus for that reading project, but Exodus was definitely a book on that list, and that is the reason that I picked it up to read. And this book tells the sort of history of the formation of Israel, and it's kind of a generational story, I believe, in which it talks a bit about the first sort of settlers to Israel, and their continued struggles with living on the land, which wasn't very easy to live on, and also the struggles for independence. And there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot of religion in this story that I found really interesting. I did end up watching the film version of it, starring a very young Paul Newman, and I have to tell you, teenage crush right there. The fifth book that I wanted to talk to you about today, of books that I loved as a teenager, is this book that is The Power of One by Bryce Courtenay. Look at the size of it. That's definitely one of the things that a lot of these books have in common today, is the sheer number of pages involved. But this is the book I was talking about earlier about. I watched the film. The film starred a really young Stephen Dorff and Morgan Freeman, and it talks about apartheid in South Africa. I saw that film was based on a book. I really enjoyed the film, and I decided to pick up the book to see, to find out more about the story, especially when I picked up this book and it's so very long. I thought, what didn't they talk about in the film? And the book, again, it has so much more detail and description. There's a lot to PK's childhood and growing up, and a lot of his experiences that are just not covered in the film, and I found it so very good, and also a little bit heartbreaking. I really enjoyed finding out more about all of the different struggles in South Africa in terms of apartheid and sort of racism and that sort of thing. And the sixth and final book that I wanted to talk to you about today is a book that I read when I was 18, and I was in a difficult spot. I had just moved to the UK. Things were all up in the air, and a friend let me borrow this book, and he said it's his favorite book and maybe I might enjoy it, and that is this book. It's A Suitable Boy by Vikram, Seth, and look at the size of it. This book is almost 1,500 pages long. Oh my god. Just the idea of reading a book this long now gives me heart palpitations. But this was a fantastic book, and it came into my life right at the exact perfect moment that I needed it. And it's the story about India's independence. Very, very, very good. And I remember being completely swept away by this book as well. Loved it. And I've just realized that 5 of these 6 books have a very specific setting in mind. Like, this is it's India, South Africa, Israel, the South in America, and Japan. I mean, I guess you can say that setting is definitely something that is incredibly important to me. That's it for me today. Here are the 6 books that I loved as a teenager. I'd love to hear the sort of books that you loved and read as an actual teenager. Or just tell me what your favorite book is. I'd love to hear that too. Let me know down in comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.